The first publications appeared not in blogs or anonymous Telegram channels, but in serious outlets. Just the other day, the Washington Post, the Financial Times, and Reuters simultaneously reported on Donald Trump's sharp statement against Turkey, citing sources in the White House and NATO structures. According to their information, in a closed-door conversation with senators, the American president raised the possibility of freezing military supplies to Ankara and imposing additional tariffs on the Turkish economy. The wording was tough. The Turks with Erdogan have gone too far. That's a direct quote cited by Politico, referring to insiders in Congress. For NATO, it came like a bolt from the blue. Turkey is the alliance's second-largest army, a strategic ally in the Middle East, a country controlling the Bosphorus and the Black Sea, and yet it has found itself at the center of Trump's latest outburst of anger. Ankara reacted cautiously. Officials limited themselves to the statement that diplomacy remains the main instrument for resolving disagreements. But behind closed doors, according to the Turkish newspaper Hürriyet, the National Security Council began urgent consultations. The fears are obvious. The suspension of American military equipment supplies, including parts for F-16s and Black Hawk helicopters, could paralyze key defense programs in Turkey. Moreover, new tariffs would hit the steel and textile industries, which sustain hundreds of thousands of jobs. And this is where China unexpectedly entered the game. Xi Jinping made a move many call a diplomatic breakthrough. In an interview with Xinhua, quickly picked up by Asian media, he said, "It is time for Turkey to reconsider its dependence on the United States and choose a more reliable partner. China is ready to support Ankara and offset its costs." According to the South China Morning Post, Beijing offered preferential loans for modernizing Turkey's defense industry, as well as infrastructure investments aimed at softening the blow of potential tariffs. Furthermore, Bloomberg reported that a closed round of negotiations had already taken place between Chinese and Turkish delegations in Doha. The talks covered energy, military cooperation, and the use of the yuan in bilateral trade. For the United States, this looks like a diplomatic disaster. Respected analysts at the Carnegie Endowment openly write, if Turkey drifts toward China, it undermines the foundation of NATO. It is worth recalling that Ankara had already been pursuing an independent course in recent years, purchasing Russian S-400 systems, periodically blocking NATO expansion, and making deals with Iran. Now, if China establishes an economic and military foothold in Turkey, Washington risks losing control over one of the world's key regions. Interestingly, European media have also picked up on the issue. Der Spiegel writes of a crisis of trust within the alliance, while Le Monde reminds readers that Turkey is a crucial EU partner on migration matters. And if Ankara strengthens its ties with China, the balance of power in the Mediterranean and the Middle East will shift dramatically. Turkey would essentially gain an alternative source of military and economic support, meaning that US leverage through threats would lose its effectiveness. The situation is further complicated by reports in the Financial Times that informal consultations between Turkish diplomats and Chinese representatives are already taking place on the sidelines of the UN. The talks reportedly involve the creation of a special fund to offset Ankara's tariff losses and long-term investments in the energy sector. Sources cited by the paper claim that the volume of support could exceed $20 billion over the next 5 years. For Turkey, which is struggling with high inflation and a falling lira, such proposals look extremely attractive. Washington is trying to act preemptively. Yesterday, the White House press secretary stated that the United States expects all NATO allies to remain loyal and honor common commitments. And Trump himself added on Truth Social, if Turkey decides to play games with China, they will pay dearly for it. But many analysts believe that such threats only accelerate Ankara's rapprochement with Beijing. In the expert community, there is already talk of a new front line in the global confrontation between the United States and China. Whereas Beijing previously strengthened its influence in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, it is now entering the very heart of NATO. Turkey is not the periphery, but a strategic hub linking Europe, the Middle East, and the Caucasus. And losing this ally would be for Washington comparable to a diplomatic earthquake. For now, Ankara remains silent. President Erdogan is not making loud statements, but Turkish media close to his administration are already publishing articles about new opportunities for strategic partnership with the East. According to Al Jazeera, a Turkish delegation is planning to travel to Beijing in the coming weeks to deepen consultations. And although this is officially presented as an economic dialogue, in reality it concerns much broader agreements. For the United States, this is a troubling signal. Now, however, China presents itself as a ready alternative, and one with immense financial resources. According to CNBC, this year alone, Beijing has allocated over $60 billion to programs for strengthening international ties, from Africa to Latin America. And if part of these funds is directed toward Turkey, the balance of power could shift instantly. Already today, Turkish business associations such as TUSIAD are publicly declaring their readiness to expand cooperation with Chinese companies in logistics, telecommunications, and energy. Meanwhile, anxiety in the United States is growing. The New York Times writes of a potential loss of Washington's geopolitical control, while Senator Lindsey Graham has openly stated that Trump is playing with fire, pushing allies into China's arms. Even within the Republican Party, dissenting voices have appeared. Some politicians fear that by the time of the next NATO summit, Ankara will no longer be discussing plans for joint defense, but new credit lines from Beijing. Financial markets are also reacting. The Turkish lira, contrary to expectations, strengthened after reports of Chinese offers. Investors interpreted this as a signal that Ankara could secure a powerful financial buffer. American corporations operating in Turkey, on the other hand, saw their stock values fall. Companies in the defense sector in particular fear losing multi-billion-dollar contracts if Ankara indeed begins diversifying its suppliers. And the most telling sign is society's reaction. According to a Metropole survey, more than 55% of Turkish citizens today see China as a promising strategic partner. By contrast, trust in the United States has fallen to a record low, just 23%. These are not just numbers. They reflect the fact that after years of unrelenting pressure, sanctions, and threats, the patience of Turkish society has reached its limit. And now, with an alternative ally appearing on the horizon, the perception of America as the primary guarantor of security is rapidly dissolving. All these factors add up to an alarming picture. The world is standing at the threshold of a new geopolitical reality, where China is not merely competing with the United States in economics or technology, but openly reshaping the structure of Western alliances by pulling key players to its side. Turkey could become the first such example. But if that happens, a chain reaction is inevitable. And then the question will no longer be whether America retains leadership, but how quickly it loses it.